think if anyone was in any doubt about the state of the marriage, whatever people say regarding Meghan Markle and the former royal known as Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, well, what do you think to this particular picture? This is a picture that his wife, well, took of him backstage while meeting the music legend James Taylor. And forget that Harry looks absolutely bored out of his mind and slovenly, scruffy, it's a concert, I get that, perhaps he's dressed down. But is this the best way that you want to portray the person that you said is incredibly handsome and an even bigger heart? And more importantly, you described, well, less than 2 weeks ago on a podcast as a fox. It doesn't put him in the best light. Counteract that with a picture that you were more than happy to release alongside your photographer friend, Jake Rosenberg. Both looking arty, both looking fresh-faced, bushy-eyed, all that sort of stuff. And it's a totally different image, isn't it? And that's the problem now that Meghan Markle has to get over. Because really, whatever people are saying, what we're seeing, and this is from an excellent source, well, a few sources in fact, that Meghan now is in the, well, she described that particular post, didn't she, as a concert era. Some people might say this is her declining era, simply because she's now decided that, well, perhaps, as ever allegedly, everything's needed that could be achieved has been. The thing is, has anybody told Harry? As ever, let me explain. Morning, chums. Lovely to see you today in the very heart of London. And yes, very heavy pollen count. You can tell, can't you, from that sort of slightly husky voice. But we battle on. Welcome to another episode of By Royal Appointment. And the reason I wanted to update on this particular structure of the ongoing saga, the soap opera, that is, of course, Harry and Meghan, is because it's very, very clear for all to see. There we have once again, and this is, let me just explain how this works, working with celebrities, trust me. You see, when you have nothing left to sell, it's just yourself, right? Now, if Meghan was incredibly successful with the As Ever brand, the jam making, the flowery sprinkles, everything like that, the Netflix deal, even though when she put out the video, she said, Netflix called and they asked me, they'd like to partner with me. Thought about it, oh please. You couldn't wait to snap their hand off. Now, of course, they're waiting and wondering whether you're going to deliver the next batch of goodies that you promised over nearly a month ago now. But here's where it gets interesting because, as I said, what you have to look at is exactly the dynamic of where they are in their marriage. You see, if you remember, Prince Harry has openly stated that apparently everybody who reports on this finally just gets, upset because it's not going to happen, doesn't happen. And I truly hope for his sake that it doesn't. He's literally placed all of his bets on this one thing. The fullness of his family, the friends, we saw all of that with the doorbell knocking. Clearly, he's now on, his own. There's no two ways about that. But where it gets interesting, you see, is that, obviously when Meghan was asked, did she see herself married to Harry forever? 4 octaves higher, absolutely, yes. But pictures paint 1,000 words, don't they? And what we saw recently, particularly with the Beyonce concert pictures, which, let's be blunt here, right? Who benefited from that more? Beyonce, the superstar, with failing ticket sales, and not exactly a fabulous sort of PR structure behind her right now, and on the wrong side of 40 to be playing the sort of pop kitten. And I'm not being unkind, I've worked in the industry. They basically tell you over 40 is the end. You can reinvent yourself, but there's a dull period between 40 and 50. And to still be sort of doing the sexy moves, a la Katy Perry, doesn't always work out. Meghan and Harry were not in the choice cuts of seats either, not in the golden circle. And the other thing that I find very strange about that whole episode of Beyonce and the fact that Meghan got somebody, no doubt Harry, to picture her, filming her dancing, draped all over him, the cowboy hat, the signatures all the way around it, just screamed desperation. But the bigger story is their world is literally crumbling. And it's crumbling for one simple reason, their own doing. They are the architects of their own downfall. And what you're seeing really now is Harry and Meghan scrambling around, trying to find some, relevance. Who's going to take more notice of them? More importantly, who's going to invest in them? You're looking at a man, Prince Harry, who's literally lost yet another court case and, gave in to the previous one. So possibly that will counteract that money. But he's going through a lot of money very quickly. These ventures with Meghan do not come cheaply. You know, don't believe that she comes from wealth, as the story goes. Truly, Meghan needs Harry's money for all of those little ventures, whether she's doing the, 40 times 40, whether it's the latest thing now with the whatever it is, the jams and stuff. Everything is being funded from Harry. And unless that's proven on accounts, then I'm sticking to that. Where did the money come from to set this up? There are no backers. There are no visual people putting money in. Now, as we know, when Meghan decided, she wanted a different life, she took, literally, the opportunity to go and stay in somebody's house she'd never met. But we shouldn't really be shocked with that, because then she'd never met half the people that she had coming to a wedding. Now, that may seem strange in itself, but of course to the British monarchy, very strange, and of course the UK public. But the stories that she fed us, we were supposed to believe. Her father was too ill, and then of course Buckingham Palace disinvited her niece. Again, time and time again, total tissue of lies. But this picture at that James Taylor concert that Meghan has allowed to go out of her husband says oodles about what she truly thinks of him, and the way that you look at the picture of her with Jake Rosenberg and how happy she is, carefree, youthful. The pictures that we're now seeing with her and Harry are a woman who's trying to align her own brand, because quite frankly, behind the scenes, things are taking a darker turn. Let me explain. You see, if you counteract the picture of Prince Harry with this picture with Meghan Markle backstage with James Taylor, you just see everything, right? There you have it. There is this music legend, literally, being pictured, filmed, whatever you want to call it, signing something for Meghan. And she is there eagerly waiting, you see? And this is basically how PR works. There he is, not facing the camera. You could have done the other picture or the other way around, him holding exactly up what he'd signed. But no, Meghan's in the forefront of the picture because she's important and he's just busy signing away. And what's interesting also, when you think about it, is each time they post these things on social media, all the comments are turned off because they don't want to read negativity. The point about interacting with an audience, good or bad, is the fact that you have to take the rough with the smooth. Even on this channel, it might surprise you chumps that you get negativity. You get people being incredibly rude or swearing, and of course they're all instantly removed. But, everybody's allowed their opinion, and that's the whole point of interaction. You have to say, you might not agree with me, but there you are. But Meghan is so thin-skinned that she can't allow it. The reason being, apparently, is that she doesn't want this because, of course, she's launched this sort of social media thing as a brand. It's not about personal stuff. But then we find the personal stuff on there, don't we? Like the Mother's Day picture with, of course, her son standing out in Mexico, literally just looking for friends, but no friends to be found because he's not allowed any, clearly. And I go back to the other point as well, where Meghan posted about her exactly, thank you to all of the friends that came over to help us celebrate. You see, my belief is this, and as ever, I have to say allegedly, and this is my personal opinion. She talked about on those podcasts about how she has normal friends, the mothers group, on the WhatsApp group, right? Now, it doesn't matter who you are. You can never, ever be 100% sure that no person is ever going to leak that particular story, because that is the celebrity world. What you're saying, the pictures, the thoughts, the comments are worth money. I'm not suggesting these friends, if they do exist, actually would do this. But it's odd, because if you had a picture of a birthday party for a 6-year-old boy, surely just the group of the adults all standing around the cake, you could have shared that. And that, to me, is where it's strange, because I would believe that these people are fictitious. You see, there must be somebody that she's made friends with, yet in Montecito, people tell me, no, they never see them. They never intermingle with the locals. And more importantly, she keeps herself to herself. How would she allow herself to be that free and easy on WhatsApp if she dare not, in fact, turn on her own comments simply for Instagram? You see how this works. But back to the current state of where they're at. Now, as you can understand, things are very, very tricky right now for Harry and Meghan. They're simply reeling from possibly even a worse start to the year than the previous year, and that was bad enough. It's not really just about the Centre Bali disaster with, of course, Dr. Sophie Chanduka. That was incredibly bad. But there are many other situations and problems too. And the bigger issue now, you see, for Harry and Meghan is how do they counteract that? Now, as I said, the problem that you have, literally, is a situation where you don't have anything to sell. If she had soaring sales figures, if he had new deals, if the TV show was going well and they got a commission for a third or a fourth, if Polo was successful, they would have had all of those things to shout about. Now they've just got to go out there and keep themselves relevant. Meghan's suddenly taken on this new chief of staff. Laughable in itself, right? As I pointed out, it's a bit like the thing with from the office of Harry and Meghan. What office? I mean, why do you need this? But they're sort of cosplaying the role because this is the only thing that he knows what to do. Everything he's picked up is from literally his life up until that point of quitting the monarchy. So he knows that this will get attention, like her fake HRH. Remember that. Now, moving forward, the bigger problem for Harry and Meghan was, well, right from the start. And normally what happens in a situation like this, and as ever, you have to say allegedly, is that Meghan Markle is simply bored. Harry is bored and she's bored because it's not exactly gone to plan. And this really all started way back when Harry decided to hop on that bus with his pal James Corden. Remember? For CBS. And it was a strange publicity thing, wasn't it, when you look back and think, what was that about? What were they trying to achieve? But actually behind the scenes, that didn't even go to plan. Yes, let me explain. You know, I think we were all really shocked when we first saw this, were we not? Yeah, there we were, of course, you know, Prince Harry on top of a bus, an open-top bus, cruising around LA with his chum, James Corden. And it's funny to think, isn't it, because that was a colossal hit, literally on, you know, the viral, as it were, the viral sensation, as they call them. But it was a huge hit, something we'd never seen done before. And the idea really was that James Corden, who had been a chum of Prince Harry, but then saw a dramatic decline, and this wasn't actually relative to Harry, but of course James himself got himself into hot water by apparently and allegedly being disrespectful to staff, waiters, all that sort of stuff. And that really was, well, very hard then, wasn't it, to come back from. I've met James. He's a tricky customer is the best way that I would suggest, right? Of course, people do have to have egos if they want to get on. And he's done very well, all the way from, say, Fat Friends to Hollyoaks to being a late night chat show host on CBS. And the story goes, of course, he wanted to return back here to the United Kingdom because he was missing his children. A little bit of the same narrative, of course, of Prince Harry did recently while sitting down with the BBC. But way back when they were on the bus together, you see, the idea originally was for both of them, oh yes, Harry and Meghan, to be on the bus together. And this is really where Meghan's very, very clever, in my opinion. Because you see, she always presents Harry as the lunatic, the victim, the one that really is ready to say all the wrong things, attack his own family, do the sort of things that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily do. For instance, you would never see Meghan having a go at the, fake waterboard thing, would you? Because that would ruin her hair and makeup. Even recently, when she sat down with her chum Jamie and she cried, well, there were no real tears. I mean, there were just no tears. Everybody knows that because she had base makeup on, despite them saying this was makeup free and they were just having a girly chat. You see, nothing's real in the world of celebrity. So back to the tour bus. You see, what happened was the idea was simply that Harry and Meghan were going to go around some of the more, famous places. And yes, the afternoon tea trolley was going to be wheeled out on the top of the bus, and Harry and Meghan would have afternoon tea, but not in a sort of, difficult way, shall we say. But you see, what was interesting was they couldn't decide on what venues they should go to. And one of them really suggested was, well, maybe Meghan should go back to some of the sound stages that she'd gone to with her father. No, we couldn't do that. We couldn't have her having happy memories, you see, so she couldn't, that was scored out. And many numerous ideas behind the scenes were put forward from an excellent source that was working on that particular show. You see, if you take long enough, it always comes out. People are ready to tell you what really happened behind the scenes. As ever, we have to say, allegedly. But again, this is fascinating because Harry was really excited because she was going to be the, this sort of like tour guide. She knew LA and there were two Brits. Now, at the 11th hour, suddenly Meghan decided that she didn't feel particularly well. Convenient, that, right? We saw that before. Remember, she got ill when she was supposed to come and meet President Trump for the very first state visit. She couldn't, couldn't possibly do that. This wasn't to her liking. She didn't see herself paraded up and down on the top of a bus going round LA. It wasn't where she saw herself further down the brand. You get the picture. So Harry had to go it alone. But they decided, well, Meghan decided, let me point this out, that, well, why not we just have a sort of FaceTime phone call? And if you remember, Meghan in full slap, makeup, having her hair done, and then derided her husband once again. You missed it, right? Because that's when we found out she calls him H or has. And James Corden famously said, oh, can I call you that? No, you're not my wife. But you see, demeaning Harry, even though he's the higher level, he's the one that people are interested in. But no, she has to remind people she can just call him that because she's his wife. Anybody with some self-respect and knowing their historical background and perhaps just wanting to care and shape for this very difficult and some might say rather delicate person who clearly has a lot of issues unanswered, well, why would you want to do that? Well, again, Meghan, it had to be about her. And by inserting herself in there, a little bit like she did briefly for the Polo show for Netflix, she reminds people that they come as a package. Without him, you don't, basically have her, and vice versa. They have to be together. So everybody knows that unless, of course, it's Meghan who wants to promote her own things, well, clearly she's no use for Harry. You see, this was very easily replicated from a source that was working with them during, of course, the promotion for the book Spare. They begged her time and time again to perhaps pop up, particularly on the Stephen Colbert show when he was promoting the book. But no, she said it wasn't anything to do with her. It was his story. She had no idea really what it was about, and that was his, that was his thing. Now remember, this is a book publishing that had already given her a substantial amount of money for a book called The Bench. But you see, when she was doing that, well, there was no real room for Harry because she thought her name, if you remember, the Duchess of Sussex, The Bench, was going to be incredible. So she didn't need Harry for that. Likewise, when it came to him pushing the book, well, she didn't feel particularly comfortable. And maybe she didn't, because there you were having his story about how he, his first paramour was an older lady, turned out to be like a year older, but, don't bother about the truth. And the interesting thing about that is, this is what's gone through now in the marriage, and this is what's continuing to go through to this day. But you see, the reason why Meghan Markle wanted to contact the King is she didn't realise, according to the source that used to work with her, that she was now going to be this all-encompassing mother figure. She thought that Harry was a very sort of rounded individual who was happy to move away from royal life and start something new in California. That's the narrative she gave the staff. And now what she's finding is that there's this guy that is literally clinging on to her, needs her, given up everything, but for Meghan, it's just a transient thing. In the Variety interview, if you remember, she famously said, nothing's permanent, everything moves on. A similar line, remember that? And now the situation gets worse, simply because Harry did this. If you think about it, you can understand, of course, why certain senior members of the British monarchy are very concerned by, Prince Harry's actions, his movements, that sort of stuff, because time and time again, he's proven to be unstable, unhappy, and really is just flicking it on for the cameras. This is exactly the sort of thing that he claimed he did while he was inside the monarchy, and now it's a replication. As I said, it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because, you talk about security and all of those sort of things that Harry apparently holds very dear to him. And then what you find is that he's willing to go to someone's house, literally he's never met, to start a new life because they got in touch with him. Now, perhaps there was all that due diligence and everything done, who knows? But either way, a strange thing to say the least. But of course, once again, this was driven by his wife, cable TV star Meghan Markle. She decided this is what they were going to do, and this was their way out of Canada, even though King Charles was still paying for their security. You get the picture. But it was this recent event that saw Meghan Markle absolutely blow a gasket. And this is the one where really Harry got caught out. Some people might say rather foolishly, well, he was back over here in London. looking for a chum on a West London street. And as I pointed out, that wasn't the only area that they visited. The newspaper in question knows fully exactly the background story to this, but I've been told that for now they're going to sit on the remainder of the story. That's going to be interesting when it comes out. So why was it a problem for Markle? Well, you see, this is a woman who's trying to build a brand. And basically, she had no idea that Harry was trying to connect, communicate, or reignite friendships back over in the United Kingdom. You see, as far as she's concerned, all of that is now done and dusted. And as I told you at the time, sadly for him, even though he lost his security case, sources tell me that Meghan, in fact, was absolutely delighted. You know, she doesn't want to come back to the United Kingdom, and I'm not quite sure where that leaves him with his children. I would suspect at some point he will have to bring them back simply because he will want to show them his homeland, certain things that he did when he was a child, etc. I'm sure there's going to be that fight as it goes further down the path. But being caught out, of course, pressing on doorbells, well, as I said, Meghan and her team literally went into a meltdown. Of course, a clever marketing person could have really turned that around very quickly. For instance, I may have suggested something on the lines of like, oh dear, terrible actually, yes. But you see, if you order from me, on occasion, sometimes a prince will even deliver your jam. Take the sting out of the tale, make yourself fun and make yourself amusing. This is not what the Markles do. Oh, no, no, no. You know, apparently they were very concerned about the invasion of privacy. And then there was concerns about whether that particular person's house they'd, knocked on or on their door ringer, etc. How secure was that? They were looking at legalities even at that point. But really, you've just been caught high and dry. The bigger picture you see is Meghan curates every single thing that she puts out. Everything from the music that she puts underneath the videos of her Sweet Pea Sundae, or indeed her, kids, some people might say, others might suggest otherwise, helping her cook bake in that kitchen. Doesn't necessarily look like her kitchen, does it? But there you go. And this is part of the problem. You see, whatever Harry does, he's getting it wrong. He's now the biggest liability in brand Meghan. She has the name, she has the profile, she now needs the business to click in. And that's really where she's focusing on. Even if you remember at the start of the year, she made sure that the world knew that Harry's job now was to simply video her running up and down on a beach, right? That's very important, really. You've fallen that far. Remember, he was the one that was striding out as her protector a few years back when apparently she felt suicidal, but attended that concert at the Royal Albert Hall. And she was gripping hold of his hand that tightly because she was crying. But we saw the crying, as I mentioned previously, on the Jamie show. So one suspects that perhaps it was internal tears. You get the picture. Hello. And this now is something that they've got to climb back from. And it's, as I said at the start of the video, what she's trying to do is by lining herself to say, look, we're having fun. This marriage is great because we're at the Beyonce concert, when quite frankly, the tickets cost the price of, say, I don't know, going to KFC or Pret a Manger over here. Things are that bad in that world. And as I also pointed out, if Meghan really was that chummy with the pop superstar Beyonce, well, where was the backstage picture? She was hoping, according to a source, to get a very similar picture to the one, of course, that Prince William got when he took his two children along, Princess Charlotte and, of course, Prince George, to see the pop megastar Taylor Swift. Another swift exit because, of course, she didn't want to appear on Meghan's initial podcast. And the idea, really, as I said, was that Meghan was hopeful that by popping up at the concert, she could lure Beyonce into the podcast to discuss, well, how her business evolved, the fact that she looks after her own publishing, marketing, concert stuff, talking about how do you do it from a woman's perspective. But so far, the guests, shall we say, have been rather lackluster. And then, looking at it from a bigger picture, if you remember when, of course, Gwyneth Paltrow looked like she'd been trolling Meghan Markle, but then rather ill-advisedly appeared up in a video with her, well, originally that was also going to feature Harry. But at the 11th hour, suddenly it was done quickly and she had no time, allegedly, to let him know. You see how this works? When Meghan Markle dumped her previous husband, Trevor Engelson, There were sort of the stories, were there not? Remember when she first came into the British monarchy about, well, it was very much underplayed. You know, obviously this was groundbreaking because a divorcee was suddenly coming into the British monarchy. Biracial was the thing that was really pushed ahead, even though Meghan had truly never identified as that previously, all the meanwhile trying to get work in Hollywood. And her biggest break had come and gone. She's now in her 30s, a dangerous age for an actress. She was desperate to find somebody that could now elevate her, for want of a better word, to the next phase of her career. The bigger problem was who was going to do that, and that was very, very difficult. Now, even their story about their meeting together, their very first meeting, is again shrouded in mystery. And as they come up to celebrate their 7th anniversary, you know, it's going to be very strange, isn't it? Because clearly they've told various degrees of lies, that sort of thing. It's going to be very interesting, isn't it? Because they've told various degrees of lies, you know, that sort of thing. And I think what's interesting again there is exactly, well, what do they do next as a couple? You see, when she decided to get rid of Trevor, whatever story she says, sources tell me it was simply that Trevor had not delivered. You see, Meghan, as I said, dangerous age, had not made it big in film, still doing bit parts, and even in Suits was way down the Richter scale of importance, even though she was parading up and down. She could not believe her luck when this gullible prince came along and very quickly decided that she was the one. Now, I may stick my neck out here and say, I truly believe in the beginning there was that frizz-on, you know? But people like Meghan, and I've worked with many of these people in the past, it's euphoric, it's exciting, you know, suddenly they're getting what they want. She's now got Vanity Fair in the palm of her hands. They're saying wild about Harry. She didn't care about that. You know, she was on the front cover. She would have given her eye teeth for that a few years back. Suddenly she's getting these offers that she'd never had before. And it's all down to this one man. But as the progression gets further and further down the line, what you're seeing is a man that's totally uncomfortable in this lifestyle. And he believed that they were going to have this, you know, great marriage, go off to Africa, maybe save elephants, work in the safaris. I don't know. I think he truly believed that story. And then consequently, as it's developed, she drew him back into her entertainment world. And I've mentioned this numerous times, but if you remember on the red carpet, she said, we have several projects on the go. I can't wait to share them all with you. And pushed further, apparently it was, yes, my husband's really enjoying working in the entertainment business. He's not. He has nothing to do all day other than the ongoing court cases. There's one or two bits of Invictus, but now a lot of the charities are stepping back, all thanks to the Africa Parks, to the Centre Bali. The goal, the dream for doing this, which I think he truly does enjoy, has had to take a back seat. And this becomes problematic now for Harry, because without the charitable work, what is he but just the bag carrier? When Meghan was honoured at the Times 100 in New York last month, or earlier this month, it goes so quickly, chums, well, he was just the door holder, wasn't he, the bag carrier. Times 100 would have much preferred to sit down with him, but, you know, he pushed her, because she always has to come first. Now, again, where this gets really interesting in the sources who talk to me about where they're at as a couple, right now he's realised that the biggest problem he has is how now does he provide the lifestyle. Now, people say, oh, Neil, you know, they're loaded. Money goes like water for these people, you know. They may be loaded, but there are huge costs attached. Think about the branding, think about everything that Meghan is costing for her daydream billionaire idea. When she sat down with a real entrepreneur who struck lucky with her own makeup range, Jamie, well, really, the deal was that Jamie was going to be hopefully talking to Harry about charitable causes and, you know, how that works and monetizing and all that sort of stuff. That really was the goal. Jamie is very ambitious, but she took the second fiddle in hope to get the first fiddle by that. But now, because of the charitable stuff, that's kind of gone by the by. And even that sit down didn't generate really enough as what she'd hoped it would do. As they move into their phase, as it were, Meghan has decided that she's now going to take full control of their lives. And that will be more exposure for their children, because that is now the only monetization truly left. And that is going to be very short term as well, because without pictures of the children with, members of the royal family or attending royal events, it becomes just two kids in California. It's not exciting. There's no stardust to attach that to. And there lies your problem. Harry knows this. And that's the reason why I put out that line, literally, on the BBC interview to say that he misses the family. He'd still very much want to get back and do certain things with the family. But she's got no interest, because she believes that she is bigger than the royals. She is bigger than everything else that's required. All she needs is a bit of time to prove it. But Harry knows that time is running out. And the bigger thing behind the scene is, when you look at these pictures of, say, her at the Beyonce concert with her husband, and I go back to the picture again of the way that she poses with other people, it's incredible, isn't it? Now, one thing many people will have forgotten is Meghan wanted to try and get in with the Gen Z group. And this failed spectacularly, right? Because if you remember, during the LA fires earlier this year, she reached out to the Gen Z pop star, Billie Eilish. And basically, this was going to be wonderful. But Billie Eilish didn't come on board. Neither did Adam Levine. They didn't open that door. And that could have been a very lucrative door, because obviously Meghan, in her mind, does not see herself as a mid-40s former actress who's married rich. She just doesn't see that. She sees herself as an entrepreneur who's doing incredibly well, and the world waits to see what she's going to do next. The deal, I'm sure the sentiment must have been quite nice at the beginning, but truly the idea was to get the Gen Z people on side with a fun video about, these are the sort of people I truly connect with. As I say, Beyonce's in her mid-40s, been a pop star now for 20 plus years, but not exactly cutting edge anymore. Neither's Katy Perry. And Meghan needs to stay relevant. Now, having a husband who looks miserable, not interested in anything, and seemingly failing at the projects that apparently he set out to do, like protect his wife with security, you can see why behind the scenes they're, well, shall we say, less than stellar. For the camera, Meghan will always paint on a smile. But for Prince Harry, I've been told this from an excellent source, he's finding this harder and harder to do. And as they approach, as I say, their next wedding anniversary, while they may look back at that particular, engagement video and say it was simply orchestrated reality, that could be the happiest moment they've ever truly shared. For now, things look bleaker than ever. Until next time, please do join me for another By Royal Appointment. And if you can, as ever, chums, if you can like, comment respectfully and share. And as ever, thank you so much for joining me today.